All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 88. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Jay.
Glad to finally meet you.
You too.
It's been looking forward to having you on. But like I said, for everybody listening, welcome to episode 88. We have with us tonight retired Colonel Paul Kraft, United States Army, also a former Marine, which we'll talk a little bit about as we go along. So one of the things we've been doing lately is a bio. I love doing the bios because makes everybody sound really important. I love it. And I got to thank ChatGPT for responsive by them. That helps out a lot. So tonight I'm honored to sit down with Colonel retired Paul A. Kraft, a combat veteran, educator, and lifelong public servant whose career spans more than 3 decades in uniform and in leadership. Paul grew up in Montana as the youngest of 6 children. He was the first in his family to attend college. In 1983, enlisted in the United States Marine Corps Reserves, beginning a military career that would last 31 years. He later commissioned as an Army combat engineer, serving in both the Montana and Ohio Army National Guard, ultimately commanding the 16th Engineer Brigade. Following the attacks of 9/11, Paul activated twice, deploying to Afghanistan in 2003, 2004 with an engineer task force supporting the 10th Mountain Division, and later commanded ground-based missile defense operations in the North Capital Region. He retired in 2014 at the rank of colonel, earning awards included. Some of his awards include the Bronze Star, Legion of Merit, and multiple meritorious service medals. Alongside his military career, Paul dedicated 35 years to education, serving as a teacher, administrator, superintendent, and now as Ohio's Superintendent of Public Instruction, a role he assumed in January of 2024. Tonight, we talk about PTSD, post-traumatic growth, leadership, and how military-acquired skills translate into meaningful civilian service. So thank you and welcome. Helping me welcome Paul to episode 88 of Pours of Patriots.
Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the work that you and your supported charity does. It's huge for the veteran community. There's nobody we owe more to. I'm always reminded of the Winston Churchill description of the RAF pilots, where he said, never in the annals of history have so many owed so much to so few. I feel like that's where we are in America right now.
Yeah.
Only a few percent of Americans have ever served in the military at any one time. Now it's less than 1%. And the rest of us, sleep easy in the night because, those men and women are out there serving and protecting and keeping the world as safe as we possibly can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks for your service. I was, looking at your bio, because it's always fun, where we're at in the podcast when I haven't met anybody or don't know anybody. So it's always exciting to do research on them. And I was kind of looking at, am I more impressed by your 31-year military career or your almost 35 years now as an educator? And they're both equally that, but I find myself now, I'm like, wow, that's pretty amazing to do. So, I mean, I think you're one of those guests that it's interesting that you've been so successful in both of these, these professions, and I hope we get to talk about that more. But I always do quotes, and I started the first one with education. I had to choose between, do I do a military quote? I started with education. This one's from Robert Frost, and it says, education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. So we got some other education ones later.
No, I like it. Yeah.
But,
It certainly is. It really speaks to being humble in your knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of that poem, be careful when you drink shallow out of a pool of knowledge, because a little bit of drink intoxicates. And then if you drink more, you sober again. Same kind of thing. Education is so often just learning what you don't know and what more you need to learn in any given area.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, it's like, I often, since going through Save War, I've relooked a lot of things in my life and what I focus on and things like that. And that's one of the big things is as I've gotten older, I think I've used my education better to stay out of that emotional stuff and being able to listen to how other people have it, that I'm not always right. And I think that's I take that from education because I've been around, so many different people, I was able to get my master's degree. So you've had all these kind of things, but part of the education too isn't just in the schoolhouses. It's just the education of life, which gets a lot easier, I think, when you get a little older. I never realized that, but
no, I would certainly agree. Now. I see education as a way to give freedom to an individual.
Yeah,
because they have that ability to handle so much more as they go. I was amazed in my career how well everything tied together. So as a second lieutenant, as a first lieutenant, as a captain, so doing my platoon leader time and my company commander time, I was a classroom teacher and coach. And what I learned as a teacher made me a better young officer on teaching those, junior NCOs and enlisted soldiers what they needed to know to do their jobs. On the other hand, what I learned in the military made me a better teacher.
Yeah.
And especially the skills and the discipline and work ethic that we pick up in the military. And it's just the two sides of my career have gone together so well in that, as I made major was about the time I started doing the department chair and some teacher leader stuff. And as I made lieutenant colonel was when I moved into building administration and district administration. And as I made colonel is when I moved into the superintendency. And both sides fed one another. What I learned from one field tied into the other. And there's also a huge advantage of being an educator and a National Guardsman, because you had your summers where you could throw yourself into the Guard. And even those times when I was called to active duty, I remember as a young, I was a young captain, and I was teaching at Upper Arlington High School, and fairly new at the high school. Lucasville prison riot happened, and my company got called up. I'm sitting there at the desk of the building secretary as they gave me the directions of how to put that, make sure we put out the lockout devices for 3 shots on our M16s before we leave the armory. And she's looking at me like I have, 2 heads, because she just knew me as a young teacher.
Yeah.
But they were wonderful when, that call came about making sure that I felt supported and ready to go. When I was in Afghanistan, as a building level administrator and still teaching a class or 2. They collected school supplies for Afghan kids and sent those over with a Codel. It's just the two sides have fed together so incredibly well. I feel pretty blessed on what I've been able to do in both worlds.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Why we're on this is a question I was going to ask later, but how does your military background influence how you lead your educators in these districts and, now the state with some of the roles you're having? Have you ever thought about, would you be as effective, in these roles if you didn't have military, but basically like, how has that background helped you in those situations? Because a lot of times people think like, especially in today's world, like, it's almost like 2 different sides of military and education. Military and college or something like that. It seems like this one of those 2 things that couldn't be any different if you're not in it and understand it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is there's this perception that the military is all screaming and push-ups and all that, because that's what boot camp's like, and that's what they see in the movies. But that leading troops who are often smarter than you and sometimes more educated than you isn't about yelling and screaming. It's about getting a joint sense of mission and a joint understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And the same is true of any leadership position. So I really feel like what I learned from there, it was especially fun to have, some of the skills that I brought over translate so well. I learned PowerPoint when I was at Cass Cube.
What a great school.
And they've changed it around. It's not called that anymore, but it was where captains go to learn how to be staff officers after finishing up their company command. And we learned PowerPoint. This would have been early 90s. And that was still just coming into the world. And so from then I've been able to present, and I still use PowerPoint to organize my thoughts, I swear, in terms of putting it all together. So those skills, but more broadly, the idea of a sense of mission, the idea of a combined purpose, of loyalty to that group with whom you're working right there, those military skills, as well as some, specific techniques. I was just at a meeting the other day, and somebody was complimenting another superintendent who taught them about this thing where after an event, they would get everybody together and they would do an after action review. And I'm like, we learned that as a lieutenant, he's not creating anything. This is
person didn't create it.
And he was, he got out as a major. He was a guardsman as well. And, I said, no, that's great. And one of my people was there and he raised his hand and said, he made us do that after a really bad middle school concert. So yeah, it's some of those specific skills. even the military decision-making process. I've walked civilian teams through, that very discrete development of courses of action and analyzing those courses of action and then coming to a consensus on what the right way to move forward was. So some of the very specific skills have tied together incredibly well on both sides, but the same thing on the civilian side, having, the ability to form a lesson and understand anticipatory set, and then understand, the direct instruction, the guided practice, the independent practice, tied in so well with so many of the military skills that we needed our young men and young women to know. So no, again, so blessed in both of the worlds in which I've been able to live. Yeah,
because I like I said, I've never heard anybody say it that way, but I often, because when I got out, one of the big things is like, hey, and I know we'll talk about more about that transition out, or when you get stuck, and I've talked about it before, but like everyone's like, oh, you're a leader, like you're going to go manage people. That's all they kind of taught you can do. But I quickly learned, like, holy cow, I was a salesman too. But I've never heard anybody talk about a teacher really, because because it's hard, especially a lot of some of the guys that were in my platoon. I was platoon leader of listen. So I don't want them to think I was teaching them everything, but it was kind of a both ways of going. I was learning how to teach maybe, or like learning that kind of thing. But I've never learned that, because you really are. There is a lot of responsibility of I probably called it more of hazing my lieutenants when I was a company commander, but yeah, you were teaching them. But I've never heard it said that way, because that is a good point, because there really was that. And that when you say that, I can think of the senior leaders that I had that were teaching me. Those a lot of, especially in particular, like the one or two that I would consider to be mentors, right? But there were a lot of officers that were very open to teaching you the next step to go along. So it does kind of fall into that. Because I never thought of myself as a teacher, that I could teach. I mean, I probably could, but I'd have to clean up my language, and
we're funny about that. Yeah. May I say that as the person in charge of the code of professional conduct, we would prefer, you not to drop F-bombs in front of our students.
I actually can do that. I can actually, it's surprising when I can turn that off and when I can turn it on.
Yep.
It's pretty
it's a
interesting.
Learned skill.
So let's rewind. We did move a little bit further. I hope we can talk. We'll definitely talk about more, but you grew up in the state that I have claimed that if I win the big lotto, I'm moving to Montana. I've got a couple mansions already looked at. So grew up, spent a lot of time in Montana, since 5 years old, I think you said? Or
Yeah. My dad was a Navy guy. So I was actually born in Virginia Beach. He was stationed at Norfolk for the end of his career. And I was the youngest out of 6. So my older brothers and sisters lived that military life of DOD schools and following him around from California to Hawaii to Norfolk. But I was young enough that I don't remember any of that. He retired, did a couple of years in Iran before the Shah was deposed. And then we moved back to his hometown and my mom's hometown in Montana to take care of his mom and to finish raising those 6 kids. And lived way out in the country. I had 19 kids in my graduating class, but for grades 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, we had 19 kids, in the whole school. And we had 5 of us in our class. We were a big class. And then you went up to the class of 19, and then you were just a number,
19.
But
so the question is, am I picking the wrong state to go to if I win the lottery?
Well, it's funny. We always called it, because you watch Yellowstone and you think this is what Montana's like. We called it poverty with a view. Nobody had any money, but it was beautiful, except if you visited. And that's the thing. People would say, oh, I went to Montana. It was beautiful. I'm like, when did you visit? And the answer is invariably July and August.
Yeah.
I'm like, go back in February and milk a cow
all
winter, and then tell me how beautiful Montana is.
I always laugh, because it's one of the, we do a lot of people do the whole pull in your lottery tickets. We did that for a lot of years at work. And then the only time I did lotteries was crazy. I this last one, the last big make was, I literally had 2 mansions that I was looking at, one in Bozeman, and I can't, where's the other one at? But it was so funny, off of Zillow, and I'm looking at it. And then when you lose, I'm like, I was upset for like a couple of days. I'm like,
I took my wife back probably that's been over 10 years ago. And the house I grew up in collapsed. So it's no longer there. So that I dreamt of living in a trailer, because the kids who lived in a trailer seemed to always be warm.
Yeah.
because our house wasn't even warm. We had one section that was still the old homestead that still had a dirt floor. So it was not a rich childhood, but I wouldn't trade so many of the lessons and the skills that I picked up either.
So I mean that is a hard thing. You come from a dad who's retired Navy, probably that time frame, a hard charging guy, probably.
He was an
strict.
E7 when he got out. Yeah, pretty hard charging, but pay wasn't much back then.
Yeah.
And retirement pay was less than that.
Yeah.
So the one benefit we did have was we always had insurance.
Yeah.
So that was huge back in our little section of Montana. But no, it was a good. He was a hard man. I was the youngest out of 6. 5 of the 6 enlisted right out of high school, including me. And the 5th or the 6th one who did not enlist, she married an Air Force guy right out of high school. So in her own way, she did as well. So, and that was just because that was how we knew to get out of our little town.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, it was how I knew I could get some money for college.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at that, because I still say that the military has that. A lot of people don't realize is like it combines what we talk about, the opportunity and then education. I think that, the military is like one of those things, like think about it, if you leave when you're 17, 18 years old, like I can't even remember what I was doing when I was 17 or 18 to 22 or 23. I can probably tell you what a lot of it was like drinking, part, what I mean? But there's an opportunity to go learn something, an opportunity to better yourself. And then on top of that, education. I mean, I'm like you, it's interesting. I don't try to, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, because I used to use it as like a reason to, thought it was special, because it's not, but I was the first person in my family to go to college as well. And when I look back at that, it's like, it's when I try not to have that mean anything, but it is kind of a big deal. So, when I look back and I see, I see my dad over there, to be able, my mom, and like to be able to do that, you're like leading, you're doing something nobody else did, which is makes you feel good. You get a lot of praise. I was, looking good with the family, but what the other part of it, there's a ton of pressure. I don't know if you felt that too, that you're the only person doing it. I just felt like I couldn't fuck this up. You know what I mean?
No, I understood that, but I will say this: 3 of my older siblings, after their military service or during their military service, went back and got their degrees. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because they learned the skills and, suddenly had the ability to avail themselves of that. 2 of those became nurses. One of those got a degree she never really used, but it was good to see them go back. And even the other brother who made a good career in the Navy was a nuclear, sub guy, and he still works in that field out at one of the nuclear sites. So it changed the course of my life, and it changed the course of most of the members of my family because of those experiences that they had.
And I think it's important, not even education like college anymore. I thought, I've been trying to push a lot more lately, is like, education can be, the trade schools, all this kind of stuff. But I look back at that, and I definitely think it changed my trajectory, not only mine, just also like my children. Like I'm like actually shocked at what my kids are doing, like the opportunities that education presents. And I mean, I know not everybody has that opportunity, but I really didn't have it either. I just kind of did what I had to do to get through it. You know what I mean? Yep. It wasn't like I was like, everything was paid for, but I just kind of just took that leap of faith. Like, cause it was to be a little bit different. You know what I mean? It was to be able to like better, I hate when he's sitting there. I don't want him to take it the wrong way, but like I kind of want to be better than my parents. You know what I mean? I wanted to be better off. I didn't want to have to worry about the same things. You know what I mean? But at the same time, there was a pressure because, like I said, I was like, I think that's what motivated me the most, because like I can't fail at this, because then I'm just, what am I showing everybody? You know what I mean? And I don't know. It's just a weird time. And I don't know if that's how I don't hear that very much anymore. You know what I mean? I think the opportunity to go to college, I feel like it's more common. Maybe not. You would know.
No, there's so many more pathways.
Yeah.
I mean, with the strong community college opportunities that we now have, and more support coming from the state for families, and even from the private college world, more support to kids who otherwise would struggle financially. So there's a lot more pathways, but we still, every year out of the districts that I've been a part of, We put kids straight into the military, straight into the academies, and the National Guard right now will basically 100% tuition at any Ohio public university if you enlist. So it still is an incredible path for very, very many of our kids.
Yeah, I still, as much as the times change and, we're out of the two wars for 20 some years. So it's, I know there's a lot of uncertainty, but I mean, it changed my life. I mean, and I think it's just generational, right? It changes my, my kid's life, you know what I mean? Cause I kind of now, as a graduate of college, I fell into that. Like, I kind of expect my, my kids to, that's kind of the standard, you know what I mean?
Yeah, although I think 2 of my 5 may not go straight to a traditional college. I think they may go a different path, because I think you're right. There are so many ways now that you can build a good living and a good life. Yeah, we need tradespeople as much as we ever have. There are associate's level degrees that can really open up an amazing opportunity. So it's not one size fits all. I do remember being a part of a Chamber of Commerce group that was looking at how do we, get more support to our local companies on their workforce. How can we get people to take those jobs and to avail themselves of those opportunities? But at one point we all stopped and we realized that everybody who was around the table pictured in their mind their kid going to college and not moving into one of those jobs.
I mean,
and those were the people that came together to try to address the situation.
I'm guilty of it. When you look at it, I mean, I'm not lying. When you look at that's kind of, but I had I always think I talked to the kids about the STEM stuff, right? Because, that was why I was like, if you're going to do this now, you got to focus on something that's got some type of return on investment on it, where you're going to, you know what I mean? And luckily they're all, that landed with them. But yeah, I was that thing, where you had that conversation, if you would if you're being honest about it, my generation is the people that we, a lot of us were, there were a lot of us that were first time college folks. So we thought that's the only way. Right. And then, so if you heard some kid was going to the military or they were going to the trades, you were like, yeah, you were happy, but you're honest. You're like, well, that's not for my kid. You know what I mean? And I felt myself a little bit that way for a long time. But now you look at it and you're kind of you see these, guys that have their own companies that are, that are plumbers. There's, just the education, we started off the conversation, just isn't, school stuff. There's a lot of other ways of getting education. It's just find out what works with you and works for you, I think, is important.
But what still holds all that together is some of the skills you do learn in the military, whether you're doing it as an officer, whether you're doing it as enlisted. It's showing up on time, consistently. It's sacrificing for the greater good. All those skills that we pick up are still what employers really, really care about. When I hear employers lamenting the workforce, it's not because this person, didn't have a high enough GPA or didn't have, enough math skills. That stuff's good. But what they really care about is, are they good with people? Mm-hmm. Can they show up consistently? Can I count on them? Yeah. Those are those life skills that I feel like we're losing with some of the younger generation, but that the military teaches in spades.
That's true. Yeah. I'm for all the bad, I'm always thankful for the path I chose. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you hit it on a little bit, lessons learned. What's the biggest lesson you learned growing up, the youngest of 6 from your dad at a young age? What would you say? One thing that's never leaves your mind.
I think we had a small, not particularly successful cattle ranch. And one of the things you learned is those animals always need taken care of. There wasn't a day, a morning or an evening when that cow did not need milked. There wasn't a winter day when the hay didn't need to be distributed and the chickens and rabbits fed and the ice broken on the horse and cattle trough. I mean, you had to be there. So that consistency of effort and the understanding that if you did not do those things, if you did not get the firewood cut and carried in, the family was not going to, be warm on those cold Montana nights. I mean, so it's the idea of self-sufficiency, the idea of consistent effort as being just part of who we are. And I think that translates itself into how you approach life and how you approach raising kids and being a good employee and a good friend. So having a military dad, I think, was helpful from that perspective. There were other parts when you may not want to remember, those kind of things. But no, all in all,
Anything you want to talk about or no?
No, I mean, no. He could be a hard man,
Yeah.
and some of that might have been generational, some of that might have been military. But I don't know what was that mix of each of those kind of things. It wasn't until he was in his 60s, 50s that he started ever telling any of the kids that he loved them, with the possible exception of my sister, who might have been his favorite. I think that might have happened earlier, but in general, but by the end, with the grandkids, with his kids, he was throwing it out like candy. So he'd really,
I love you. No.
He'd really come around. So, but watching that transition, again, some of that I think was generational. Some of that was his military background. No, it's my oldest son, my oldest son, had always kind of thought he was going to join the military. He had watched me, do deployments. He'd watched me, through my career, and I had just made colonel when he was graduating from high school, and we also could have used the help because most of that time I'd just been a teacher, so we didn't have a whole lot of money, and it would have been really helpful for him to have college paid for. And right at the very end, I think he decided it was going to be more fun to just be a regular college kid than to join the military. But it was funny watching him because there was an itch down inside of him that never kind of went away. So I suddenly get a call from him, and at age 24 or 25, he enlists into the Ohio Army National Guard as a combat engineer. Joined, not initially, but his second assignment was in the brigade that I, was lieutenant in and that I commanded at the end of my career. And he ran into a few officers and NCOs who had served with me, but there were, 7 or 8 years between when I'd retired and he had gone in. So you know how that goes in a military organization. Yeah. That changes the whole flavor of the organization. But it was just interesting that it was something that I think he still felt that he needed to do. And he did 6 years, made sergeant, and I'm so proud of him. And his picture's still up on my hero wall right next to Ollie North and Senator Dole and Ronald Reagan. So yeah, I'm really proud of him and going in and having done, his part and have had that experience as well.
Yeah, since I have 3 boys, so the only one has the itch, I think, is the youngest one. But the other 2, it's just like not. It was never like the thing. Never like my oldest son was going to do a naval nursing thing, and I think when it came down to it, he didn't get it. But he was just like, I don't think I really want to do that anyways. It was just more motivated by the money. But it's and I don't know, because it's interesting. I always try to figure out when I had the itch too. But I had it too. That like I said before, it wasn't, and he's heard me say before, it was a way to get out. And it was a good opportunity. It was like people don't realize, like, holy shit, you can go to college. You're going to come out here with a job,
yeah,
making pretty decent money compared to what you're doing. And I knew that too, because you grew up in the military family. Like I knew the difference between someone who's enlisted an officer. So you're like, okay, this seems like a good thing to do. But it is interesting because people always ask, if you're in the military, I don't know if you feel that, but like, are your kids going? And I'm like, no, my youngest one, he might. His brother broke his elbow, so he's got this like bad elbow. And we always thanks, Ben. It's a big family joke. Thanks a lot, Ben. But he's the one who's always, we make a joke about, he's always like, I would have been a Marine, Dad. And I was like, damn it. Like, what are you talking about? But why a Marine? He's like, but yeah, I don't have that, because I feel like all that stuff I wanted to get away. There was something inside me that wanted to do it. And it wasn't, and I look back, it wasn't a pressure from my family. It was just something inside of me that I wanted to do. And I think that's important. I think some people have it and they don't. And I think for me, I knew, like, if you look at me and my sister, like my sister's 8 years younger than me, like, I don't think she is old enough to really understand, like, see all the military stuff that I saw, like, when he was at a certain place. So I think, does that have an impact on it as well? My kids don't really, they're too young to remember what it was like to grow up on, a military base or all that kind of stuff. So you just wonder where that itch comes from. I do have it that a lot of the itch comes from from formative trauma, but
in our
there's
case,
other
it
parts
was,
of it, yeah.
it was need as well,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but we've actually seen countrywide, force-wide, you know, historically, the group that was easiest to recruit from into the military were those kids of military members.
Mhm.
And that has started to break down. It's
Yeah.
it's not seen as being an automatic. It's not seen as aspirational the way that I think it was for my generation. And it sounds like you were in that transitional generation.
Well, yeah, because
as well.
I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that is true, because I mean, but you look at also, I think there's some things that, I mean, what we talk about all the time is the veteran suicide and the mental health crisis. Like, dude, I used to always look back, and like with my dad being a Vietnam veteran, and like you'd hear all these stories about the Vietnam veterans that were off their rocker, and I was like, these fucking, like, I'm be realistic. I'm like, these guys are, what the fuck is your problem? Like, come on. And then, you know, you start to look at, you know, what, you know, the current generation of veterans have been through. Like, these guys, you know, 4, 5, 6, we have people on that 7 deployments, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And you start to see the real after effects of it, like mentally, physically, marriage wise.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't blame that. Like, kids are now like, holy shit, the shiny cool part about it. There's a real dark side to it that I think has really showed itself in the past 20 some years. If that's, you know, that's my opinion on it. But I think a lot of it is just like seeing just for what it is. And I think another part too is there's a lot of, I still feel like there's still a lot of negative, you know, I think it's gotten a little bit more negative being in the military again. There was a few years where it was really cool, but now it's not the coolest thing. So there's a lot of like, and that kind of scares me a little bit, because if you can't get the people that grew up in it and saw it, it's going to be really hard to start, you know, drawing it in. And I mean, hopefully, you know, that changes. I've always said too that, I don't want to sound like that old boomer, but they've always been there's always been people that answer the call, like your sons that get the itch.
Yeah.
There's people that you would never even suspect would have joined the military, and they do, and go on and serve their country for, you know, however many years. So I'm always positive and optimistic that the itch that we had, that you had, your son has, that it's still out there.
If there's a good news story to it, they've had to increase compensation for our soldiers and sailors, airmen, and Marine in a way that they never had to before, because, you know, they had to make it economically viable as well. That wasn't a huge consideration, I can tell you, in 1983, you know, much less, you know, in the 60s and 70s during the draft time. So, you know, my dad was a draft era veteran, and they made nothing. And that didn't get a whole lot better during the downsizing, you know, that we experienced in the 70s. And, you know, we had a nice little time, you know, little section in the 80s where we kind of built up again during the kind of us trying to win the Cold War. But we saw another period like that right after Desert Shield, where the military became much smaller again, the peace dividend years. But it's, you know, we've consistently since 9/11 have needed a robust force. And I think that's one good thing that has developed, is I think compensation has done a better job of keeping up, and that's helped to keep those numbers. But I think it's also made life a little bit better for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine on duty as well. But you're right. The military veteran suicide issue has been a drag on the force. I mean, it's a loss for that individual. It's a loss for that family. It's a loss for that unit if they're still affiliated. But more broadly, it's just a loss of those life experiences and skills and life force on all of society. I mean, there's nothing more heartbreaking than hearing of a colleague that has made that decision, and wondering what more could we have done for them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I talk about it pretty, you know, I lived about 20 years where I didn't really want to live, and, you know, I call it the slow suicide I was on, and those, and yeah, I'm thankful for organizations like Saber Warrior, which I volunteer at. There's like, you coming on and talking about it, like just being able to to get it out of the dark and into the light I think is a huge thing, because yeah, as much as I'm involved in this, which I never thought I would be, like that I'd be like, like trying to an advocate for this or to stop it. You know what I mean? Because I was one of them, right? I was one of these people that was like, holy shit, I'm going to kill myself. I don't want to be alive. I didn't want to be alive. So the scary thing is just, like you were saying, it's hard to, like, no matter how in I am, how much it still hurts to see it happen. And it doesn't even have to be a military person. It just sees like, hear these stories of suicide and you're like, holy shit, like what could we have done? Because I still have it. It's a, a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah.
And I've said this many times that, like, I've never been better than I've ever been with my mental health. And I completely owe that all to Saber Warrior and going there, and then me continue to be in that community. That's what's changed it. You know what I mean?
What did they do? Was it the sense of purpose you got? What if you could say, if you had to describe in a sentence or two?
On me, I like this. I like it. No, I think so. Like, one of the things about Saber Warrior that a lot of people, talk about, and it's one of the things that nobody really wants to talk about, is there's two parts of PTS. There's, and one of the things that, I don't say the D, you know what I mean? But, complex PTS. So there's, what Saber Warrior is doing is looking at complex PTS, which is a combination of what happened to you as a child, and then also what happened to you as an adult, developmental trauma, and then moral injury. So, what I found is, like, what people don't want to talk about is what was driving me was, and making me have these guilty feelings and the shame were things that happened to me when I was young, right? Like the feeling of, like, and he's heard this before, the feeling of my father leaving to go to Korea when I was a young child, and remembering and just being like, it's just me and my mom, my dad abandoned me, right? I know that's not what he did, but that's the feeling. These things that happen to you when you're a child that nobody wants to talk about. That's the key. And I think that's what's really holding back, at Saber Warrior, that's what we talk about, is most of these people, it isn't, the 7 combat missions you were on. It's that, right? Because you don't know how to deal with, I never learned how to deal with trauma. I never learned how to talk about my feelings. Right. I never learned, he's 77 years old over there. He's a different man than he was when I was younger. Right.
Sure.
And it's fine. I'm not making him wrong for that, but like, we weren't running around talking about our feelings.
No. Right. Absolutely.
Right. And if I did talk about my feelings, I've talked about this before, and I'll say it again, my mom weaponized that against me. So that stuff, so Saber Warrior is like, it gets back to the source of trauma, which, for a lot of us, I have it. And I'll say this the day of my grave, and why I continue to go back to Saber Warrior and the role I do, is that I was stuck in that. The parts of me were stuck being an 8-year-old child. Mm-hmm. And when I was 35 years old, when push came to shove, sometimes parts of me still acted like an 8-year-old. Right. And then I'd have a bunch of shame. I'd have a bunch of regret, all this kind of stuff. And that's what it's done. So it's just, there's a combination of, like, I before Saber Warrior, I've done all the counseling, I've done all this kind of stuff, but nobody, the VA, you can't talk about what happened before service. Right. And I'm sorry, but, like, it's not a popular thing that people hear, is like, a lot of the broken toys in the world go into the service. Right. And people don't like to hear that.
No, they're looking for a fresh start. I could see it.
It's to get out, to better your life, to dominate others before you get dominated, to look good, right? Like, there's something that said, and that's what a lot of people don't want to look at. Like, there's these stories. Like, I have a super patriotic story I can tell you about why I joined the military. I can get super patriotic and say, oh my God, my father served in the military. He's a Vietnam veteran. I was around my whole time. I just learned about service. I just always picture myself doing that. All I care about is serving my country, right? That's what I told people for 50 years. The reality is, I want to get the fuck out of my house. My mom wasn't the most pleasant person to be around. And honestly, when I decided to do it, I wanted to be better than my dad. People don't want to hear that. That doesn't sound as romantic.
Yeah. Yeah. I prefer the other Darwinian.
Yeah. I mean, but
the other Darwinian history sounds better.
But when you talk about that, you break away all these things. You break, like, that's the part of what we're talking about. That's what this is. And it isn't just the military, it's the warrior class. When we're talking about first responders, police officers, like, this is reality. This is what we're seeing. And Saber Warrior is, I firmly believe I can't thank this organization enough. that saved my life. I mean, I'm dedicated to it for the rest of my life, but like, this is the future. Someday this is the way to solve this problem, because everything else doesn't work.
It's great to hear. I've been blessed. I've never felt that PTS was something, that has been impacting my life. In fact, when I sent you the note, you said, "Hey, what are some things you want to talk about?" I've felt blessed on the opposite, that there were things that I experienced, especially in Afghanistan, that I would rather not have experienced.
Me too.
Things that I would rather not have seen. If anything, I think it made me a better leader back here. I think it made me hopefully even a better parent, although my kids might argue that. But I have a good friend. She was a community volunteer, a parent, and she still reminds me to this day that a little bit after, we were going through some tough times in our school district, and had a tough election coming up. And if that election didn't go through, we were going to have to riff a huge number of staff members and all that. And, we'd have a bad day where somebody posted negative stuff on Facebook and all those kind of things. And she still remembers me saying a couple times, "Hey, we're all going to go home safe to our families at the end of today." There are people that aren't going to be able to say that today. So we'll get past this. And that formulation has stuck with her to this day. I just talked to her a few days ago. And so, yeah, I really feel that those negative experiences have helped me appreciate how blessed we are from a day-to-day perspective, and to deal with the stresses that we have here, because the stresses we have here don't compare to what you see in a combat zone, don't compare to, needing to recover, soldiers to send them back home to their families.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with you. I think I have, like, I'll just say that's a part of me was that way. Great. Yeah. Like I still the same way, like as bad as work is today, no, it wasn't great today. No one's, unless something goes wrong, everyone's going home. It's fine. But there's just those other parts that we're coming into. It's the parts of like the things you've seen or the things you've done that you just, they on the outside, everybody would never know that. Like when I talk about like I've had people still to this day, like when I start talking about my suicide ideology, they'll start telling me, "No, that can't be possible. I've known you for 10 years. There's no way you thought that." And I'm like, because I did a really good job at hiding it. Like everything else looked really good, but you weren't seeing me, by myself, and you weren't part of the internal judgment I was having for myself. Right. So I have no doubt. I feel the same way. There's these things that, but I found myself, I have a different look at it. I always thought I was a great dad. Right? I mean, parts of me were a great dad, but there's a part of me that was a raging lunatic. I mean, I've verbally and mentally abused my kids. Right. I had it as I'm teaching them the right way. I'm doing this kind of stuff. But like when I look back at it, I'm like, wow, why didn't Gabe call me 2 days ago and tell me that his car's snowed in? In his thing, because I know how the old me was going to react. I was going to freak the fuck out, right? What do you mean you didn't understand that you should take one of the 5 shovels that's in the, like, what I mean? So that I saw that, and those are things that with my PTSD I just couldn't control, right? It was just my reaction of like, to be honest with you, like I grew up in a place like, this isn't against him. It's always weird when I say this, when he's like looking right at me, because I feel like he's burning a hole in my head. But I'm like, like perfection, you had to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't perfect, there was consequences to it. You know what I mean? And that's like the same thing I had for my kids. I have these expectations of them were like unrealistic. So I thought the same thing. I'm not saying you don't feel that way, but you don't have that case. But that's when I really looked back and said, "Oh wow, I'm a good father because I have a definition of what I think a good father is." And it's the definition of a bad father is more important. I had a definition of bad father, which was all the things I didn't do. Like I would say to I've never I've spanked my kids, but I've never put my hands on my kids. So I was like, oh man, I'm a good dad. I didn't hit my kids. I did all these other things, but the things when I looked at other people and judged other people as a bad dad, it was all the things I didn't do. Meanwhile, I was doing some not so great things. So, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of it came from my own internally, how I felt about myself. That's the important thing. Everything is in my life is how I felt about myself. It was a very different, I was angry all the time because I was sad and scared.
Yeah, there was actually one of the things I struggled with. And you kind of think your different life realms. I'd rate myself as a very, very good teacher, a pretty good administrator. I'm only so-so as a dad.
Yeah.
And I'm not that good of a driver. I'm so glad I drive a Tesla now and it can self-drive me most places. There are things I'm not good. And yeah, I'm not the best.
A Marine with a Tesla. Okay, we got to remember that later now.
Oh, it's the wave of the future. When I'm driving downtown every day, because I've got a long commute downtown, I push that button when I hit the freeway and it takes care of, 95%. I drove it out to Montana this summer and it drove easily 98% of the miles.
Nice.
So yeah, no, that's going to be, we're all going to experience that over the course of the next several years. Pretty soon it'll be your Optimus robot driving it for you kind of thing. But that's all coming, which is going to be a different world educationally, by the way. Yeah. So that AI and the humanoid robotics and automation is going to be the next thing we have to figure out, because we're going to have all that before this next generation of kids graduates. So that'll be interesting. But no, you're not wrong. The things I learned from the military have not translated that well to being a parent.
Yeah.
I would joke that, I could get 2,000 men and women to show up exactly where I want them to be, exactly when I want them to be there. And I can't get my kids to go to bed on time. How do those two sides of my life work so differently?
It's one of the things when I do the work we're talking about in our men's group, and we're talking about, we're reading a book that it's prompt this conversation. But here's the thing: here's the other part of it is I don't my kids don't have a listening for me. That's the same way I didn't have listening for him. I sometimes don't. I was about to earlier today, seeing he was supposed to grab something from the grocery store, and it was I'm getting frustrated. He's frustrated, but when I look at that's the same things that goes on. I look at my kids now, the last person I want to hear about life was when I was 25 years old. So my dad, because we're just met, we're it's I don't have a listening for my, I fight that. I talk to his men all the time. It's sometimes when I look at my dad, he's 30 some years old. I'm 16. I'm fucking pissed off at him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel the same with my kids. I feel I'm beating myself down that I'm not I think I did a pretty good job with my kids. I mean, it's my wife and I talk about, we have a good balance, right? I think they've learned some great things from me. They're a good combination of us, but yeah, I don't get wrapped up about I'm not worried about being a good dad anymore. That's the funny thing. I'm not really worried about the title of being a good husband or a good friend. I'm just trying to be the best version of myself I can be. And I find that as I've started to do that, I feel like those relationships are coming back. They're starting to see me in a different way, because
I would say that's true. As I became a teenager, my dad became dumber and dumber. And then after I hit about 28, he became smarter and smarter again. So my mom was always a sweetheart. So I can't say that. I've been blessed. I raised two older kids who are doing wonderful things and of whom I'm very proud. And their mom and I separated after more than 20 years, and I remarried into some younger kids. And so, I'm exposing 3 more of those to my mediocre parent skills. And thank God, both with my ex-wife and my wife. She doesn't like it when I describe her as my next ex-wife. So my wife now they're both wonderful.
Yeah.
With the kids, and they balance us out. There's something to be said for having that balance going on in a household, and she is amazing, and our kids are. I'm so blessed. Sometimes I just have to stop and reflect on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that title, because I always said the same thing. But part of me knew I would say that I was I'm a great dad, but part of me was I know I'm not doing. But that's what I had a lot of guilt on. If we talk about this, I would, both these guys have been around me for a long time. They're over there, so they've seen it. I would act like a fucking raging lunatic, about something that didn't matter, and then I would come, I would come down here and be I get a deep breath, and I'd be so mad at myself for doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And just be I gotta stop doing it. But I just didn't know how to do that. I didn't know that, there was a lot of like guilt in that. I mean, I knew that was going on. I knew that wasn't what my kids wanted to be. Then I would be mad, like I said, like this stupid stuff about why they don't talk. Because I actually talked to one of my, my Saul brothers this morning about it, and I was fucking irritated about this shoveling thing. And as I thought about it after I said it out to him, I was like, dude, he doesn't tell me because I'm gonna act like an asshole in some aspects too. Like, you know what I mean? Right. And I get it. I mean, so I just try to, like, that's the thing is with my kids is I know we've, the good things I've done to them. There's some things I wasn't perfect, but I just hope they start this. I'm just try to be a different man to them now than they are before. You know what I mean? And that's all I can do. Like that, you're blessed to have that with the take two with the younger kids. I'm excited to see what it looks like to be a granddad where, I'm way more relaxed. I'm just trying to figure out my grandpa name,
I have two now with the third on the way, and it's a good gig. So, and I live out in the country, and we're trying to set up Camp Grandpa. Okay. So they're, my ex-wife and my son's mother-in-law and father-in-law, they get a lot more time with them now. I'm playing the long game.
Yeah.
We've got 5 acres out in the woods. We've got dogs. We've got go-karts. We've got trails through the woods. I'm building the Swiss Family Robinson tree house and the pool. So we're going to be the cool Camp Grandpa. That's my long-term plan with these guys.
I've only got the grand dog. Like one of them has a dog, and I just put mine in my 2 dogs in boarding. That's why they're here. And I've always been harassing them about, can my granddaughter dog come stay with me while I'm doing that? I'm like, no. I'm like, that's why, like, we have Sunday dinners. I can't wait to see Almy. That's my voice. I'm like, oh my God, Almy. Like, so I can't wait to be able to play that game too. But no, yeah, I'm glad you asked me about Save War, because that's the thing is I just, the one thing I'll say about that is it's not just, it's the big paper. Is a lot of people go like you said, and I'm not making you wrong about like, oh yeah, everything else, like these things are going great in my life, all these things, I don't feel this, but the problem is something in my life wasn't working. I was very successful in some other aspects of everything, but there was parts of my life that wasn't working. That's the big thing about Save a Warrior. It doesn't, you got to have that you got to really sit down, take a deep breath, and be like, okay, what in my life is not working, right? And that part of me that wasn't working was that guilt that I had for myself, that shame I had. And then also the shame of like, not being a good dad, not being a good husband, not being a good friend, all those kind of things. That part of my life was not working. if Josh if I didn't hear from Josh for like 3 days, I'd almost get ready to write him off. And then I'd talk to somebody else and be like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? You know what I mean? Like, are you still friends with, like, it was a weird thing. And since that time I've learned I'm a huge codependent. Right. And now that I've addressed all those things, it's got to the root cause of why I felt that way. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm fascinated by the idea of that it's those pre-service traumas that then can be augmented by those during service traumas. Well, the VA system is set up to deal with service related,
and that's
their mission, that's their goal, that's their purpose.
And maybe we should be wondering why we're having this problem.
That interplay between those pre-service, because any kid that you measure, we actually have a scale we use to measure those early childhood traumatic events, be that family divorcing, be that abuse, be that a parent with substance abuse,
like
issues,
those things.
Like exactly right. Yeah. So but yeah, I've never really thought in terms of the interplay of those with then the service related traumas that are just the very nature of in the nature of what we do. I'm not going to try
to give away the game, but we talk about it like the ACEs is what the first childhood experience is what I think you're talking about. So 0 to 10, right? So you're familiar with that with education. So average person is probably you'd say 1, 2, or 3, maybe.
Yeah, 3 probably.
Convicted felon. What do you think the average score is?
Oh, I bet double digits.
No, it goes to 10. So
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be real close. Yeah, 8, 9, 10.
7.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm a 7.
Wow.
Right. So that's one of the things that you really got to think about.
High, for people considering a intact family.
Yeah, but there's things that we look at those questions that have happened that I'm not going to put out on the but you just got to look at what it is. You got to look at what the adverse childhood experiences. There's a lot of multiple choices in it. I mean, there's I don't want to I'm not going to get into specifics, but that was what was ruling my life, right? Like that, those are the things that happened to me, right? And when those things happen to you, you start to change and look at things differently, right?
Sure.
You don't, you know what I mean? You don't feel the same way. You don't deal with stress the same way. You don't.
Oh, even biochemically,
Right.
it's different. Yeah. No
Yeah.
doubt.
I mean, like one of the big things is I'm a reactor, right? That's what made me really good in the military. I can react to things. I can react really well, but like the other part about it is I'm a reactor. So
yeah, there are times when that's a life skill.
like I have to, like I've turned into an actor. I have to act my way into new thinking. Like I have to act, because acting means like today, like when something happened with my wife this morning, this conversation about a lot of shit that was happening. I just literally had to say, it's time for you to go, Che. Like just say goodbye and leave for the morning. Don't like there's the old me would just start, reacting and saying this kind of stuff. And that's the thing is like, I've learned to become a reactor. Those, and you're familiar with that study and all this kind of thing, but those are the things that that Save a Warrior is focusing on right now, is to look at what's happening. Cause it's not like most of the problems you have in your life, nobody wants to hear it. It either goes back to your source of your relationship. You're having a problem with either mom or dad. And nobody wants to understand that. It's either they don't get it. They're like, oh, my childhood was perfect. My dad was perfect. That, why are you perfectionist? Why are you on time? Why do you have to be 20 minutes early to everything? Because my dad, like, okay, that's, there's getting to the source of trauma is what it is. And I mean, that was huge. Like before, like he knows this, he's heard it many times, but like up to 3 years ago, I mean, up to going to Saul, I had a lot of animosity for him. I feel like he abandoned me. He didn't have my back. Like there's a lot of the stuff I held a ton of resentment for him. And going through that, I just realized he didn't know what he didn't know. And that's the thing about generational trauma, that trauma you're talking about, it's passed on. It's passed on. That's the thing. That's why that came about, is like, if I look back and I look at his life and I look at my mom's life, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows.
No.
And they were doing the best they could. Like when I was like, I could never, ever until a few years ago be able to look at my dad and be like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? And they'd be like, wow, this guy went to Vietnam, tried to go back home. It didn't work out. Then fucking left home and went back in the military. It had no family around him. Like I can't he didn't know what he was doing the best he can. Just like I was my whole life doing the best I could with my kids and myself. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I look at it from his perspective. You're thinking he abandoned you. He's freezing his butt off on the DMZ, serving his country. Yeah, it's
yeah, but there's all. But I can go deeper into that. There's the thing of like, and he doesn't want like my dad. I feel bad that we're talking about. I feel like we want to get on the camera and say, but there's a part of me that knows like I know he.
Have you done
he's
a podcast with him?
Yes, yeah, he's a workaholic.
I'll go look.
A workaholic is a way of coping.
Sure.
A workaholic is a numbing mechanism, right? Just as an alcoholic, workaholic. Yep. Like those people that say work, and I know he stayed at home. He worked. He didn't want to be around sometimes with my mom, and he can say he didn't, but it wasn't great, right? So. It wasn't all because I could say the same thing. Like I love to be a workaholic too. I was a fucking workaholic. I was a hobbyist, all these kind of stuff. But a lot of the times I was doing that was to avoid my life.
Sure.
To avoid having to come home and be like, oh shit, I gotta, like you talked about, I gotta break the ice to get the thing. Oh my God, someone's got to feed the kids. Someone's got to put them to bed. Someone's got to vacuum the house. Like that was that's a way of, the part of him that was doing that, I was doing the same thing.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether I use projects for that, diving into a project.
See, that's
because that's your alone time. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I have it. So yeah, I love this. I'm loving where this conversation is, because it comes down to, are you isolating or are you, I have it like that's your hobbies are I was isolating.
Yeah.
I have it now that I have a ton of like, I mean, you can't see over there, but there's, it's a joke we have going with my wife is my office is back there, not in the office upstairs, but it's really cold down here until recently. But I'm in solitude now. When I'm by myself and doing something, I'm in solitude. I'm bettering myself, truly bettering myself. When a lot of stuff I was doing these projects or volunteering at some places, I was avoiding my life.
Yeah, I've definitely used that. Although I will say this, we built this huge deck around an outdoor pool that we put in. And my wife suddenly started coming out. She said, I'll do all the deck boards. I'm like, this is my project. What is she thinking?
Mhm.
It was wonderful. She came out, she did all the deck boards as I did all the framing, and she kept up on the deck boards, and it ended up being one of the projects of which we're most proud.
Yeah.
So she broke through that barrier by jumping into my paradigm, and you know, that we would both just spend hours out there, and it ended up being a really neat experience, and one every time we go and use that we treasure.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every one of them do it. I just think that's the power of Save a Warrior. Is like, it's when you start having the conversations and you really start thinking about, like, you know, peeling back the onion or looking what's underneath the next thing and all that kind of stuff. And that's what it was. Like, a lot of the stuff, I did a lot of stuff to look good. Like, work late, take on all this responsibility. Like, yeah. And I would tell my kids, like, it's more important for me to go, and Josh will know this too, a bottle pickup than come to your baseball game. You don't understand. These 200 people are relying on me. It's super important. Dude, that's because I didn't want to fucking fight the parking space situation that was going on at the game. I didn't want to sit out when it's 95 degrees out. You know what I mean? I didn't like I didn't want to be around the parents because I didn't like them. There's a reality of these things that were going on. Not everything I was doing was because I wanted to look good, but that's what I started looking at my life and be like, okay, why am I doing this? And that's what I found. A lot of the stuff is, avoiding my life. You have become incredibly self-reflective. That's not a skill that I necessarily feel like I've completely mastered. That's exhausting, actually. It's so refreshing, but it's also like, because I have it now that, like, all my problems stem from myself. So I may just be too lazy to be self-reflective. Is that? I don't think anybody is. It's just being able to look at it. I mean, that's good. No one's ever late. You just have to look at. I mean, it's not the cool conversation what everybody wants to have. You know what I mean? Right. I like, I've said this before. Like, I just recently, and I don't want to say, because exhausting sounds bad, but it's work. Like, I'm doing work like every day. Like, I mean, if you go back into there, there's like a stack of books there that I'm reading. I'm doing all this because I meditate, I'm doing all this stuff, and with all that things I'm doing, I still don't get it right. I still react. I still act. Did you just start to say you do cold plunges? Yes, I do cold showers 5 minutes every day. And this time of the year is like, if you're in Ohio, it's not good. I do cold plunges whenever I can, but like the cold shower is. One of my jokes is, you can always tell people who do cold plunges or who do CrossFit. I can tell you. Yeah, in the first 5 minutes they're going to tell you. So yeah. So you held that in for a long time. No, but the reason, but when you talk about like doing it, I'm not. The reason I bring it up is when we start talking about the why, right? And it's I was an adult child. Parts of me are still an adult child. I don't want to do things that I don't want to do. I sure as fuck don't want to take a cold shower at 4:45 in the morning. No. In 7 degrees. But the reason I do it is because I don't want to do it. That's the whole thing about the self-reflection. And that's why, and I say it's exhausting, it's when I got out of Safe Aware, I think it was like that big thing of like, when am I done with this? And I'm now on a journey that I'm never done with it. And it's probably the greatest journey I've had. And you brought up the word purpose, right? I lost my purpose in 2005 2005 when I got out of the military. I lost my purpose. Like many of us do. We don't want to talk about it. Yeah, I went and got a great job, but there's part of me was like, man, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a manager for Penske. I don't want to be a salesperson. I'm nothing. I'm not doing this. I lost my purpose, right? And now I have a purpose, right? And that's what it's given me, to be able to go back for other men to have these conversations with you, other men that I talk about. I mean, I there's things I do now that like a year and a half, 2.5 years ago, I would have never done. Like, I used to say church. I will not go to church. I was like, you're crazy. People that go to church every Sunday, they're crazy. There's a group of guys that we meet every Sunday for like 3 hours. It's our own church, and it's non-negotiable. I don't miss it. I mean, we missed it last week because of the snowstorm, but that's because we're all adult children and we're just waiting for somebody to say we don't want to go. But no, I think that's that self-reflection, and the part about it is it's not a cool conversation. I find these conversations, I can talk about this all the time. I used to want to talk about bourbon. I used to want to talk about sports, politics, but now these are the things Now, purpose is huge. It's huge for an individual. It's huge for an organization. Mm-hmm.
I'm serving as the superintendent of public instruction,
Mhm.
and we've got a state board of education in Ohio. Well, there was some political shakeup, and their role was vastly reduced from what it was when many of them were appointed or elected. And I think that was a traumatic event for that organization. And I came in after that had happened, and they were in a little bit of chaos. And we're in a much better place now. A couple of years later, we've rebuilt some relationships, some trust with some of the folks in downtown Columbus. But I think one of those reasons that the full-time team pulled together and the board pulled together is we took a step back and looked at our sense of purpose.
Mhm.
And we didn't go through a strategic planning process. I'm not very good at strategic planning, but we had a purpose, a mission statement just kind of emerge over time. And it's relatively simple. We're here to make sure that Ohio's 1.6 million kids interact every day with educators who are well qualified and who show proper standards of moral character and judgment. And that sense of purpose, that sense of, hey, this is a discrete understanding of why we're here, I think has made a difference for that organization.
Mhm.
And that changes how you interact with one another and with your school districts and the members of the public, the member of the legislatures and the administration. And I think the same thing is true of us. I've always enjoyed those times when you take a step back and you write down there's that one where you do your 5 ring,
Mhm.
and it's faith, it's family, it's purpose, it's work, it's health and fitness. It's, you stop and take a sense of what's my mission, what are my focus areas. I think that can be incredibly powerful for an organization. I think it can be incredibly powerful for an individual, is to make sure you come back and focus on why we're here and what's really important. Because you're right, without those reflections, it becomes very easy not to put your time and energy into the right thing.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing about when you're in the military is it is an organization that everybody has the same. I mean,
Yep.
let's say 95% of them. There's the people that don't. But the thing about it is like my purpose too. Then when I got out was to I have my purposes assigned to like some stuff that, and this is just me, right? This is how I have it, right? I'm not saying anybody's wrong, but like my purpose now isn't to be like a good husband. I've not been great at that. I've not been great as being a dad. My purpose now is to be a brother. And I looked at my declarations I've made, 2 of them were husband and father. And I'm a husband now. Like I could not be a husband. That's the reality of the thing. But that's not my purpose. You know what I mean? And neither is being a father, right? It's where I'm at in my stages. And people, this is very unpopular to do like those. My relationship now, my purpose is to come back for other men.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing. And by coming back for other men and being like self-reflective myself, all those other things fall into place. I feel like if you talk to my wife and my kids, and I don't care because I don't ask them, and it's just the way it is. I hope it does the way, but like something has changed in me. Right. And that's by how that, that's what's important to me now. That purpose is like to be able to come back for other men. But the titles for me were like, there was being Army officer was my purpose. Then it was being this job, and and like the job you're in now, like we can talk about get ready to move on. People lose jobs and they lose their purpose. They don't know what their purpose is. So I'm just more of like, I know my purpose right now is there's always someone out there that felt the same way I felt. And they'll continue to be there, and I can just be a person that I can hold space for them. I can look at, I can listen without judgment. Right.
What I suspect is finding that purpose has bleed over effects, positive effects on those other aspects of your life.
It has everything.
Having this purpose makes you a better husband. Having this purpose, I think, could make you a better father.
Yeah, and it starts with it starts with the big thing to me is like I never was like, I'm not a religious guy, but through my work in the past 2.5 years and work through CODA, I now understand I have a higher power, right? I have a higher power. Like my relationship, I never had a relationship with a higher power. I do now. When that person I finally realized is not this vindictive God that's judging me and all this kind of stuff through the work I've done. That person loves me unconditionally, right? So I can love myself unconditionally, because that was the problem. I didn't love myself. I didn't like myself.
Right.
So all those other things that you're doing, all this stuff start to rub off, especially when you talk about your family, right? Like, it's a whole other term is like when I'm at home, I take my masks off, right? And I become who I really am at home because I consider it to be a safe place, right? What are you really going to leave me? Yeah, your wife can't leave you, your husband can leave you. Are my kids really going to leave me? No, not when they're 14, but maybe that's why they don't call me as often as I'd like, right? Those are the things and that's what I found is like, you're exactly right. Once you have a purpose, that purpose for me, I feel like it bleeds on to everything. I'm not trying every day to be Josh's best friend. I'm not trying to be the best son to him anymore. I'm not trying to be the best podcast host. I'm not trying to be the best worker. I'm trying to be the best version of myself and love myself and have grace for myself. And what I've started to watch is like, as those things happen, I'm like, holy cow, like the calm and peace I have is just, it radiates everywhere. You know what I mean?
It does. Although I will say, God's not done with you yet. So you may, as you have those grandkids, as you approach the end of your working life and into retirement, those things will change again. I lost 2 friends this past week. So I went to a viewing on Tuesday and a viewing this afternoon.
Sorry to hear that.
And one a little bit older than me and one a little bit younger. And they both made huge impacts in this case, in the field of education. But in the end, the relationships that mattered most to them were family.
Yeah. I'm not saying my family doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to be like, I'm not saying that they're not a priority to me. Right. It's just with my purpose that comes, there's non-negotiables. I have boundaries now. There's some things that I do that, like I was down here from, working on the podcast for you yesterday and then some other calls. I was down there till like 10 o'clock at night. No alcohol involved. I'm on calls with people talking and doing something productive. And when I go upstairs, the crazy thing is there's no more judgment of how it used to be. Like how much bourbon did you drink down there? Who did you text? What were you, why were you down there watching the football game? Why you didn't come? Like it's a positive experience because my wife looks back and she sees that I'm doing stuff that has purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's cool.
Does that make sense? I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but that's
100%.
how I think that's a good example of how it transitions back. Like, I mean, like my wife says nothing about the Sunday, my Sunday meetings.
Sure.
It's not like, there's not like, oh, we're going to go like, and that's not set in stone. Like if someone's getting married, if there's a major, like a life event we're not going to that, but it's just non-negotiables. And where it was before, it was non-negotiables that really didn't make sense. Like you don't understand. I have to go to Josh's house and have this bourbon bottle party because that's just what we do. You know what I mean?
And I'm sure she sees the positive knockoff effects of all of that.
I focus on what I see. I see a positive, so I don't really care if she sees it. It's not to be mean, but I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it for myself, and I think that's huge. So
that's very huge.
This is probably we're blowing past everything. I love it. We didn't even talk about. Are we going to digress to you enlisting in the Marine Corps? Are we going to go back that far?
No, I mean, again, it was the way to get an education paid for. I mean, the joke I would give is. First off, I enlisted as a Marine. I couldn't hack it, so I became an Army officer. But for me, it was I joined the military to pay for college, and I forgot to get out. You just got going, and there was never a time, until 31 years later. And the beauty of doing it 31 years later was I had achieved everything I wanted to achieve. And felt like I didn't leave anything on the field, that it was the right time. So I missed some of the guys. I missed some of that camaraderie, but it was, having done 31 years, felt right. That I had achieved everything that I wanted to achieve. So very lucky from that perspective, but it really was just trying to get out of my little town and get enough money to go to the University of Montana. And it worked. And never looked back. Educationally, I taught for 15 years. I taught high school physics. Still miss it to this day.
And before you started that, because that's like I wasn't joking when I said that. Yeah. When I was looking at your your life. I mean, I'm more impressed at like what your civilian side of it, to be honest with you. I don't know why that is, but like, so what, you were taught for 15 years, you've been now 35 years total into what drew you to education? You kind of maybe hit on earlier, but what,
one of the things,
what was that bug?
One of the things I'm convinced of is kids can only aim for what they can see. And in my little town in Montana, the only people who had degrees were the nurses at the nursing home. We didn't even have a doctor permanently assigned to our little town. Our town had about 600 people in it, and we lived 15 miles outside of that. So there were always a nurse or two up at the nursing home, and there were the teachers at the school. And those were the only two people, the only two groups of people we saw who had degrees. And I was pretty good at school. That's how I stood out from my 6 siblings, or my 5 brothers and sisters. I was the smart, geeky kid. And so I knew I should go to college. And well, I didn't want to be a nurse. So I wanted to be a teacher. Coincidentally, there were only 2 of the 19 of us who went straight to college. Several went back after and have since completed degrees. But right out of high school, only 2 of us went. And Sue became a nurse and I became a teacher because I think it was just what we could aim for in our little town. No regrets. Wanted to be a social studies teacher. And one of my favorite teacher in high school grabbed me and said, "No, you need to be a science teacher. You'll never want for a job." And he's right. It was not been hard to find jobs. And I turned out to love it. So yeah, 15 years and a couple other classes that I picked up afterwards of teaching high school physics. And then moved into the administration side at the building level, then at the district level, and then right when I came off mission from Washington, D.C. So I was a combat engineer most of my career. We ended up standing up a air defense artillery brigade. We'd never had more than an air defense artillery battalion in the state. And suddenly the state got assigned an air defense artillery brigade. And they didn't have any senior air defense artillery officers. And they said, "Kraft, you're a physics teacher. You can figure all this out." As a full bird colonel, I went to the captain's career course for air defense artillery.
What was that like?
It was great.
Everyone's like,
yeah,
freaking out. Oh my God.
But yeah, so I went to
we had a Marine major in our advanced course.
Yeah, and you thought that was something.
That was
yeah.
crazy. I can imagine.
No, so I went to Fort Bliss when it was the air defense was still there, and learned air defense in time to come back, stand up that task force, and go to DC. And that was a long train up because, we were going to have live missiles in the middle of a fairly important, national capital region airspace. So we did a long train up and took the task force there, full year on the ground. So that was the model they went with. Is you ended up actually being mobilized for about 15, 16 months by the time you did all your train up and certifications and pre-deployment and post-deployment stuff. But that way they could do 12 months with that task force on the ground in DC. While I was there, the last couple of months, I decided that I wanted to be a superintendent. I'd kind of known that when I left. Threw my application in, got a couple of interviews, and actually got one interview, and got hired by Delaware City Schools. In fact, I had to finish up my mission, so I was actually 3 weeks late getting to school that year when I got that. But did Delaware City Schools for 9 years. Blessed, great team, great community that was really coming into its own. Delaware was a little bit like Marion, or Springfield. It was struggling there economically for a while, part of downtown boarded up, all those kind of things. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, it's really come into its own in a neat way. I don't know if you spend any time up there now, but it's a good, vibrant downtown. So I came to the community at the right time. We made great improvements in the schools. 9 great years there. Then, a few years heading up one of the information technology centers that support Ohio school districts, which was a neat role. And then my buddy, one of the ones who just passed away, was a superintendent friend of mine at a neighboring district. And he had to take a step back as he was diagnosed with a Lou Gehrig style disease. So they needed an old gray haired guy to come in and help, with transition stuff. So I went and did that for almost 2 years. And then the state board job came open and they were going through a really weird transition. And a couple of buddies said, "Hey, you're old. You can do this at the end of your career. Go try this." And and I threw my hat in the ring, and the board fell for it, and had those a couple of great years. And yeah, so all that was just, getting lucky and people taking a chance and getting to work with incredible people that are all about growing kids. you know? And no, it's been a great career. And again, I talked earlier on how well it tied in at almost every level with all those skill sets and habits of mind that we learned in the military as well.
Yeah, I think I moved in 2014, so that's one of the things I'm so blessed that, like, when we were in Texas, and I thought, we thought we were in a great school district until we moved here, and then we were like, holy Christ,
this is all intentional.
Yeah, we were destined to send our kids to, like, down to Texas, where, like, they're going to be knuckle draggers, but, like, coming to Olentangy, even the Central High, I feel like all the school districts are pretty phenomenal when you start looking at what's going on, the amount of education that they're getting. I've always been like, I'm kind of in awe with my kids sometimes. I'm like, holy cow. I don't know if it's worth the taxes, but that's a whole another joke. But but definitely.
No, Olentangy does an amazing job.
Yeah, my wife works there, so I gotta.
You have to say that.
Yeah, I have to say that. It's a great place.
I've got a lot of friends who work there, but it's a solid school district. But you're right, this whole county, it's the number one county for K through 12 education in the state of Ohio, out of 88 counties.
Yeah, you just see it. It's crazy. I mean, it's just like how freaking smart all the kids. Like, it's kind of scary. I'm like, I was I don't want to make jokes, but I'm like, dude, I'm dumber than this table here compared to my kids. And
in general, Ohio actually does some pretty good stuff with education. First off, our university systems are solid. We've got a very diverse, very robust university system. Our public schools, if you look at our demographics in the state from an average social economic status is high 30s, low 40s. We're like 38th, 39th on average income, per capita income. Well, one of the strongest correlations that exist in education is, if you want to know how a school is going to perform, tell me about its social economic. The same generally holds true for a state. So if we're 38th on per capita income, we should be about 38th on education. We're actually about 20th. We're about 25th in terms of spending, as a state. So looking at demographics and spending, our schools in general really do a good, solid job. With that being said, we're not nearly as good as we can be and should be. You and I have both served overseas a couple of times, and we've seen what some countries are asking of their kids and what they're getting out of their kids. And those are kids that our kids are going to be competing against. So as good as we are, as good as Olentangy might be, in Delaware City and Buckeye Valley and Big Walnut, we can be so much better. And we need to be. Our kids deserve nothing less. So it's a sacred duty to raise that next generation to have as much freedom and much success as they possibly can. So it's been nice having a career that's related to that important mission as well.
I'm glad I wasn't talking before all these levies came out. You might like influence me a little bit better than my wife did. I'm always like, no. That's the biggest argument my wife and I have when all these levies come out. I'm like, I don't care about the neighbor kid. I mean, but you are right. I mean, there's something to be. I always struggle too, because, like, we're so close to, like, here we are in Delaware County, then you just go to Franklin County, and there's definitely a difference. And I don't know what that answer is. That's a whole. I should ask you that question. I mean, there's that's I think a lot of those states, if you can pull some of those, bigger cities and get that education up, I think it just helps everybody. But yeah, I mean, it goes back to, that's why, people are like, why do you stay where you live now? And I'm like, I don't know. part of I know why, but I'm thankful we came here, because I didn't realize how good, these districts were compared to where we were. And that's what you don't know either too, like, until you really, like, look at it. I mean, we thought we were, like, setting our, we were, big about where we live in for this kind of thing. And then when we got up here, we're like, oh my God, the school they were going to go to is, like, not even the top, like.
One of my favorite books, and I don't even remember who the author is. I've read it years and years ago. It was called The Nurture Assumption. And it had one of the longest subtitles I've ever seen. It said, Why Parents Matter More and Peers Matter, or Parents Matter Less and Peers Matter More Than We Ever Thought. And it basically, the example it gave was that, you take kids of immigrant parents, and by the time they're 17, do they sound like their parents or do they sound like their friends? Yeah. They sound like their friends. And basically the author, what her conclusion was that it doesn't, you can do all of the right things, but really the most powerful thing you can do as a parent is get your kids around as good a kids as you can and dress them to where they don't look that different than their peers.
Yeah.
And those were those things that she could correlate the strongest with actually, success in terms of kids. Yeah. And we have this whole idea that it's quality time and exposure to the right reading materials and all those kind of things. All of that matters. But really what it's about is get your kids into as good of a peer group as you can, from, a peer group that in general cares about education, that cares about doing the right thing. So it was, I remember that being a really neat formative book.
From a parent. That's interesting because like a peer group, you always look at all my kids I'm lucky they all were athletes, right? Because I always make a joke, if anyone was in the band, I'd be like, be cool if it was like Alex next door who's in the Ohio State band. That'd be pretty cool. But my young son always gets upset because he's like, my wife he's always like, I think you like Alex more because during the football season, she's like, I saw Alex on TV or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just funny. But you, like you said before, that peer group, we always knew the peer groups were in sports. They were spending that time together. Mm-hmm. I know they weren't around kids that weren't, and that's important. Like people always like, why did you do that? 2 point kids who are don't get me wrong. Like I'd be fucking rackety as hell about it, but like, oh my God, we just spent this much on, on hotels and like the amount of money I spent on travel baseball. Jesus. Actually, we figured out with my youngest son, it wasn't good for me. but then you look back and it's like you said, right? We knew the kids they were around.
Yep.
Pretty much knew the families. They were like 70% of the families kind of stick together.
Yep.
But you also knew what they weren't doing.
Yeah, they were too busy to be doing some of those other things.
Like the stuff that gets you
as we've had families transition out of schools and districts that I've been associated with, one of the first things I have encouraged is get them involved.
Yeah.
Whether it's in theater, whether it's in sports, whether even if they're not very good at it.
Yeah.
That way they meet those kids. When they walk through the halls, there's somebody who's going to say hi to them. Mm-hmm. Because they see him at practice, they see him on that rehearsal stage. So those things can become very, very powerful because of those connections. Yeah, and to some extent, what we talked about, because of that sense of purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you look back at when you think of that, because it's a beatdown, right? But you're like, man, I know where they're at. But the other thing I'd add to that is I wish it would change is like the one thing, not only the peers, but I think that like it takes a village, right? And everyone hates to say that, but I feel like there's like, they've got to be around there's other people. Cause like I said before, when the dad that was doing the same thing that my dad was doing, I was like an all that guy because he wasn't my dad. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think being able to have mentors or someone to to look up to. And I think that's one of the things that's looked at. I've always told my sons, take advantage of that. Like you have uncles that you can call, you have coaches like this, their baseball coach, all three of them could call him today. And I'll throw that Mick Shapiro. They could call him today with whatever problem they had, and he's gonna take care of them.
Yeah,
and that's huge. I mean, that's a big thing. Like I said, I can't thank him for that because it's like those, because I know they were with him, they were coaching. It was they watched him grow up, they were around him, and that's just, I think that
it's powerful
having that village around to be able to do it. You know what I mean?
There's a mental health crisis going on with our kids.
Yeah,
and I think it accelerated. During the isolation that we all experienced during COVID, the year, the better part of the year out of school and those kind of things. But in general, it's those phones that our kids are just immersing themselves in, and that's how they interact with one another. I think we still haven't quite figured out all the second and third order effects of that. I will say this: I was down in Hamilton City a few weeks back. Good, solid school district, the community that struggles. But I walked through the high school, and it was the first time I'd walked through a high school and hit a study hall and hit a lunch since they had removed phones from the schools.
I was going to ask you that question. What do you think?
And it was huge.
Yeah.
I actually saw kids studying in study hall. I never, hadn't seen that for a long time. I actually saw kids interacting with one another at lunch, because you would walk by tables and everybody would be looking at their phones. So I was a little bit reluctant on it when the Senate was first and the House was first debating that rule. And one of the reasons I was a little reluctant about it is, as you looked at those senators and those Ohio House members, guess what they all had sitting next to them at their table? Yeah. They all had a cell phone. And I said, well, we've got to teach the kids how to use those.
Yeah.
And then I realized, you know what? We don't have to teach the kids how to use those. They'll figure that part out. Anymore, what we have to teach the kids to be able to do is to talk to one another.
Yeah, to turn it off. Yeah, I think. I mean, but you say that with the kids. I mean, the parents we're just as bad. I mean, that's like, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, that's a different thing too. That I'm the same way sometimes. Like, now I have limits on it. You know what I mean? I'm that guy that's like all kinds of limits on my phone, and like, if I hit the limit, I'm like, oh crap, okay, I'm done. But to find out is like, yeah, you're not present. You're not being present. I think I want to ask that question because I saw all these people that are like freaking out about their kid, and I'm like, how did we survive? You had to call the school.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
Yeah, and people like one time this lady was like, oh, how are they going to know about this and all that kind of stuff? I'm like, where are they going to be for practice? I'm like, dude, maybe that's a problem we have with these kids is we're always on them about like communicating and texting. I'm like, I get it. Cause I'm kind of the same. I'll do it to him tonight and do it to you. I'll be like, hey, when you get home, text me just to make sure you're back. But, I thought that was one of the greatest things to get that out of the school, because not only that, it's like they're not present and communicating with each other. And then, I wouldn't have been the one in study hall. I'd have been studying. I would have been bullshitting and being, and
talking to some of our recruiters. We were struggling with kids going off to boot camp, because the first thing they would do is lose their phone.
Yeah.
And there were kids mentally withdrawing from that while going through the stress of that first week of boot camp.
Yeah.
But so I'm glad that we took that step as a state. I still think
how many states have that law? Do you know?
I don't know, but the sense I have from just, anecdote is maybe over half of them now.
Yeah, I love bringing that up because people get like, because the reality is like if you just want it for your kid for that kind of reason too. Like they'll get you. They're fifth grade. They'll adapt. They'll get over it. They're not. I haven't heard a single kid freaking out about not having their phone.
Well, we had done it K8.
26.
We had done it K8 at my last district.
Yeah,
that was a pretty good guess. At 26 is what Josh just pulled up on Google. We had done it K through 8, and it was transformational. It cut down on bullying. It cut down on class disruptions. I was reluctant at the high school level because I keep thinking we got to get them ready for adulthood, and I was wrong. I think it was the right step. I still think there's things we have to do to teach our kids how to use AI, because you've got a good graduate who can read and has good numeracy skills and who doesn't know how to use, the large language models, versus a kid who's good at numeracy and good at literacy, who does know how to use, large language models. That kid's going to have a competitive advantage. So there's still some work to do and to figure out our practice and policy around cell phones and AI especially. But it's
but I'm okay if it's a class where you have to have it there where it's consistent. But I'm just you're not. I don't think anybody can really. You can try to argue it or whatever, but your kid doesn't need their fucking phone all the time. You don't need your phone all the time. That's one of the things. Like that's why I love this guy right here. Is like we can be down here and no one's like mirrored to their phone. You know what I mean? I used to be like that. I used to have the phone constantly with me because like who's posting what on Facebook? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Now I'm like I don't give a shit. Like I don't give a shit what's going on. Like
I still want to check the price of Bitcoin right now.
No, but I mean that's what it is. I mean, there's like, and how are you going to teach your kids when we're doing the same thing? Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's the thing too, is I have a whole thing about the phones. Like I think that's one of the greatest things the state could have done to get everybody back to.
But the mental health challenge of our kids has spiked and hasn't stopped. We've actually seen it at the state level on what we call referrals. Mm-hmm. Referrals are anything that we have to take a look at from a professional conduct perspective. Around 2015, 2016, we were getting about 15,000 referrals a year out of all the hundreds of thousands of teachers, coaches, substitutes,
Mhm.
teachers' aides, administrators, about 15,000 things we had to take a look at. Most of those were background check stuff and, pretty routine, but a certain percentage of those are serious. Well, that base number is now 24,000, a decade later. So there's been a step change in terms of just, the way people make decisions and interact. We're seeing that in our, mental health involved kids in our schools, that there has been a substantial step change in terms of kids that are struggling with mental health. We've seen it in the military in terms of the number of kids who are eligible, because there are certain things, certain diagnoses, certain medications, certain choices that kids will make that will, and then just physical fitness and health that will preclude them from military service. Well, that's almost 80% of kids now.
Yeah. I don't have it that the whole, the suicide epidemic is something that the warrior class is, it's
just us.
That we might be winning the gold medal in it right now, but yeah, it's bleeding down to everything in society. This isn't just, and what do we expect that it's going to go from, it's like I said before, we're transferring all these same things, or, they're going down to our kids in the same way. And I mean, the phone is a great way. I mean, like him and another one of our friends were over on a trip overseas. Like I could look at that and get like really upset by that. Like, oh, that's not cool. He's not like, I mean, now I'm just like happy for the guy. But then another time I'm like, how many pictures do I need to see from reels from Nate? I'm done looking at your fucking reels, dude. I mean, but that whole thing is like, we're breeding this all that, because like everything is, we're worried about, like, we used to never know what our neighbor next door was doing. And we didn't give a shit. I mean, that's how I grew up. I mean, you weren't like, if you brought up like, it didn't matter what somebody else down the road was doing, or like, we didn't know where Joe Smith was going on vacation.
We were a small town and we knew everything.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah. But you know what I mean? But you know what I mean? Like there's that part of like, I think it's good. I mean, I think, anytime, and I'm guilty of it sometimes too, I just put timers on him. I mean, I like the phone, but like I've, a lot of the stuff, all the games I had on there, like, all the Facebook pages, I'm like, I'm just off that stuff. I mean, and then, what do we expect our kids to do? I mean,
Now you mentioned getting up at 4:45 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Every day?
Unfortunately. Maybe 5:15.
5:15, but that's funny because 5:15 is mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when I don't have to work, no, I'm not this crazy. No, see, I'm not like you. I'm like,
I'm to where I can't.
I found like I used to be able to sleep late. Now the latest I could sleep is like before I wake up and I got to consciously do is like 9. I could say I'm going to go back to sleep.
For me, it's like if I go to 6, if I go to 6, I feel like there's a book.
But when you go to bed though?
10:30. Yeah. But there's a book I read and it was horrible. I did not enjoy this book at all. It's called The 5 a.m. Club. Okay. It's one of those parable-based
about that one,
stories, and just a horrible read. Horrible read. And it's probably the book that's changed my life the most, because I absolutely bought into that, and I did it for a few weeks, and now I can't stop.
But see, that's the same. The early risers, the habitual risers, are the same thing as people that do CrossFit or take cold showers, because they're always like, I got up at 3:45 this morning.
But for me, it's
Josh, but you're like, what time do you go to bed? They're like 5:15. But I think
I get a couple hours of working out and quiet reflection and watching some YouTube videos about stuff I want to learn, and it's powerful. So, but I wondered if you found on your mental health journey, did physical fitness, did those kind of habits, did that make a difference for you as well?
I feel like you're like tying on some stuff that's like, so I'm now, physical fitness wise, I have not been taking care of myself for over a decade. I just realized there's a poster, and I did the Louisville Ironman in 2016. Okay. I could have swore it was just 2 years ago, but it was 10 years ago. That's the last time I got on a bike. Okay. So yeah, no, I mean, I've just recently realized that too. I've been taking care of myself mentally, but I found right now that the one thing that keeps hitting me up is how I feel physically about myself. You know what I mean? Like, I'm 53. I still, I know I'm 53. I'm okay with that, but I'm like, I still struggle with that. So I've just lately, now I'm on a streak now, not a streak, but I've done for the past 7 days, I've worked out 6 days. Okay. I didn't do it today. So I've made a new pack to do that. And I've seen a positive impact on it.
What a weird time to do it in the middle of the biggest snowstorm and blizzard.
I got a treadmill from my wife's cousin back there. So, but that is an important thing. I think it's a combination of like mentally I'm good, but I find the things that I'm fired up about are how I look still, right? Or I'm not even that. It's more like longevity, right? Like,
Sure.
Like to be able, like, I want to be around, you know what I mean? I just went and got a physical. I just went and got my year physical, and I found it was like, let's check for diabetes. Let's check for like testosterone levels. And, you know, the things that I like could have asked 10 years ago, I didn't. So I just said, let's do it. And I mean, I've still got high blood pressure, I've high cholesterol, and that's it really. So not too bad, but you know, but it just did prompt me to do that. But I think that is a combination of it. But
yeah, because that for me has helped.
Yeah.
And I've gotten better on just the last couple of years of getting back.
But I have it too, that there's some physical parts of it. It may not be working out, but I do have meditation as a physical thing.
Sure.
You know, I'm pretty much like, not every day, but like,
oh, there's some biochemical.
there's some stuff that's doing that.
Yeah.
And then I also do like a shock T mat, which is like a acupressure. We can have you try that after if you want. It's always awesome. We need to go for the podcast. Everybody try it. And I love that. So I have those as being physical things, right?
Yeah.
Physical and mental. But
sure. Well, the cold shower.
And the cold shower. Like it's like,
yep.
Like the cold shower one is interesting because I always tell people about that. It's like, 80% of it is mental for me, but then I found that 20% of it, I don't need like.
When the weather turns warmer, try incorporating a few sprints in.
Yeah.
Just some really hard sprinting.
The last time I tried to
as people of our age. Yeah. Don't pull a hammy.
My dad was there. So like there's a traffic when you leave, there's a speed light. I think we saw it here. So we were doing our family walk after family dinner, and we all decided to see who could run by it and trip it off. Well, I was the last one to go, and I literally went about 15 feet, Dad, and I just stopped because both of my fucking quads, I felt them going. And the next day, I literally had the bruising in the back. I was like, "Wow!" And my son's like, "What happened to you?" Like,
I'd like to say that gets better, but
it doesn't. No.
I'm 8 years older than you, and it doesn't get any better.
And then I'm like, "What?"
Well, that's because sprinting is a relative term. For sprinting for what you can do. You know?
I mean, well, at least I know that I like it was. At least I was smart enough to know to shut it down, because I was like, if I would have kept going, I literally would have been like the video where you like tumble over, road rash. But like, both my sons like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm not doing too well." So,
well, Che, this has been great. I know we're getting long here.
Yeah.
So,
I think he's showing us something real quick. I think your dad's have said, "Go, Dad. Do you think the process of writing your book helped you to process your experiences in the Army? Did that process help you in your career, or more a personal endeavor? Love you."
Holy buckets. I did not know people were watching this.
We didn't tell you that's a secret.
I've not seen any of these. Kelly's my daughter. I
hope so. She said, "Go, Dad."
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
She's wonderful. I wrote a book, and it was funny. I wrote about 2/3 of it in Afghanistan, and didn't finish it. But I had done a good amount of it. And then after I got home, and I don't know if you remember, about 2000, and you would remember this, because about 2007, 2008, the mood of the country and the support and the understanding of what our men and women were doing over there kind of went through a subtle change. You had some really negative movies come out, those kind of things, and I said, I got to finish this. So I think I finished it in 2008 or 2009 and published a book. I mean, I think I've given away more than it's ever sold. So I think I did a printing of like 500 copies of it. But it was a novel about a guardsman going off to war, and they end up going through much of what we went through. But first 2/3 of the book was absolutely autobiographical. As soon as the main character started doing heroic, amazing things, then it was completely fiction, But
that was not him. No.
But it was a chance it was me trying to tell the story of National Guardsmen going off and for all the right reasons, and trying to make the world a better place for, in this case, our Afghan allies, for, the world peace in general. And so, I wrote that novel. And it's funny that Kelly asked that, because I absolutely did pick it back up and finish it as a way of dealing with what was happening just in the country, as things became kind of negative towards that 2007, 8, 9 timeframe. And no, it certainly was part of my journey of processing all that. So
Yeah, I think she's been listening for a while. What's the name? Can you get the book anywhere? Or is it still?
I don't think it was on Amazon for a long time. It's called Civilians in Peace. If
Josh is going to put a link in there for it.
Again, I don't know that it's listed anymore, but if you send me a text, I'll get you a copy.
We'd love to if you could sign. We've had a couple authors on there, but
yeah, I don't know that it's available anyway. Because, like I said, it's been now 15 years, and like I said, that's it.
There you go. You found it. Look at that.
Yeah, I used to joke that you could buy it for $9.99, but if it was signed, you could get it for $6.99.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So they were like, I'm just trying to see if we totally. I love this because we totally went off just had a conversation, which I always love these. I knew that's why I love doing this. It's amazing. I didn't think this conversation would go where it went, and so I'm so excited. I just gotta look here and see if I have everything that there's a couple like I gotta ask you the question. So 31, and I think before I say that, I think when you write the book, you brought about the National Guard. I think it's interesting because like I've talked about before, pre 9/11, like I always thought the National Guard and Reserves were a bunch of turds.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So then, but what's happening is like you just continue to watch. I think that's why I said in the very beginning when I watched like someone who has 31 years in the military and is successful and is successful in the civilian career, I'm like, holy fuck! Like I had a hard time doing one of those at one time. So like I just want to go on record. I don't think you guys are turds anymore. But no, but I think that's why I think I was most impressed by it. Like when I look back when you said that, because that is a way to put it. It's like, and I'm not the only one, and I don't think I'm making a joke out of it, but there's a lot like and not to. It came for a reason, right? Like I was in the Vermont National Guard for a while. I get it. I understand why it was like that. But
and that would have been what? That'd have been early 90s.
Yeah,
we were starting to get better then.
Yeah, so, it was like yeah. I mean, I could tell you what my drill weekends encompass, but they weren't. No, but I think that's great to be able to tell them, and I'm excited to read the book if we can get a copy to do that because I think it has changed because that's why I think when I looked at it, it's like holy shit, this dude has done to do one of those careers would be pretty. And I'm not trying to like stroke your ego or anything, but to do one of those is pretty amazing. To do both at the same time is equally amazing, if that makes sense.
I've always said it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, and
that's a huge part of it.
Yeah,
one of the themes in the novel is, we guardsmen don't look as good in uniform. We do not look as good in bathing suits. You know what I mean?
You have all the cool toys now.
On the other hand, we bring a set of civilian acquired skills that the military guys never did. So when we were, setting up the new jock on Bagram, with Washington International as a contractor, the guy building the lift station for the sewage builds lift stations.
Yeah.
Back in the city of Akron, as his everyday job.
Mm-hmm.
So we brought a set of civilian acquired skills that just don't exist in the military. You're right. Did we look as good in marching? Did we look as good in uniform? No, we weren't as fit. We weren't as practiced at the day-to-day skills that the active duty guys were. With that being said, some of the finest people I've ever served with.
Yeah, and I mean, I say the same thing about some of the guardsmen. Like when I was talking about the civil affairs officer, I was talking about like, I mean, he's a Harvard professor. Like, dude, I learned so much from that guy. I mean, I have a feeling that like some of his interactions, saved. I can't tell you how many lives he saved with him being able to do that. So you just learn to be able to see this guy's a, English professor, and it's just a different approach. Like you're right. I mean, a lot of it didn't help that you like had all the older stuff. I mean, you're right. That doesn't. But like, I think now it's a complete different view of being in the National Guard, being in the reserves, because we fought alongside each other for how many years? I mean, and you guys took a lot of them. You guys took some beatings. Like I mean, and it's not even like. And the other part about it is I think it was like, and I don't joke around that it was hard to do this when that was your one job. So if something that you really like, and I don't have it, maybe I'm wrong, but like. If you were a teacher and you're up Arlington and you're like, you're really into this, right? You enjoy doing this. This is your passion. You got to go somewhere for 10 months. There's a party that's got to be like, this kind of like, I really want to be doing that. That's why I do that full time. There's that like, I don't know if it's like a pull or whatever. I know that you want to serve, but that's not an easy switch.
No, you're not wrong. It's also tough on the families.
Yeah.
When the 10th Mountain leaves Fort Drum, all those families left behind are surrounded by all kinds of other military families and a whole infrastructure. Whereas, my wife in Upper Arlington was stuck there with the 2 kids and none of that infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly.
When she had a health issue, nobody even knew really who to call, and they finally thought of an old friend who thought of, calling the right person, who then got to the right person. And, like 4 calls later before it actually got to where it needed to be. So, but if that had happened on Fort Drum,
there's
that whole structure was there. So it's also tough on the families for those reservists and guardsmen when their service member gets sent off without all that stuff. We try to put some structures in place, but it's just not the same. With that being said, the active duty guys were there all the time. I did 2 deployments in 10 years. There were active duty guys that did 6 during that time.
I'm not trying to compare. I just look at like because I did go back to that when I was like in the being the podcast and yesterday when I was looking at over everything. And I'm like, man, this is pretty like crazy to be like. I'm in like a part of me is in all of that because like I just it's to be able to balance both of those and be able to be successful. It's hard, but and then especially the more I learned about, the National Guard, is like you said before, like, oh shit, I just became an ADA officer at, as a colonel, where you hear like a guy who's a field artilleryman who never ever was a field artilleryman. They're doing all kind of stuff. So I just, it's just one of the, there's like a dude that's like an FA guy who's like, who's never, fired a round. It's like, yeah, but he's been the, 3 years deployed doing other stuff. So I guess that's where it was coming from the beginning. And
we wouldn't have been able to do it without that whole force.
No.
What we pulled off after 9/11 wouldn't have happened without.
Yeah, it was.
I remember our first drill after 9/11. We all looked at each other going, our world just changed. I was 19 years in before I heard a shot fired in anger.
Yeah.
The only other time I'd carried a gun thinking I might have to shoot somebody was the Lucasville prison riot. Otherwise, and I actually got my 20-year letter when I was in Afghanistan, and they didn't let me go. If you can believe that, they expected me to stay.
Everyone's like,
so
why do I have to stay? No,
so for a while, it felt like we were that football team that practices and never got to play a game. Yeah. But
there's a part of me. We've had a lot of guys on that are like, this, like you and I, that were in before, tinker around Desert Storm, and you're in, and then like, just like you, I hate to say it, like just waiting for something to happen, and then like when it did, you're like, what the like? Be careful what you wish for, because someday it may come true. Yeah. Like it just like it changed everything. But like it's crazy. But these guys that like gals that went in like after, it's like, there's a part of me that's like, it's fuck. I'm in all of them too, because like we didn't know what we didn't know. Like it was like you could think of all these things that were gonna happen. Like I think of like like we had 2 JR Chiefs rotations that were like pretty close because the sister brigade went, and like the first one was what I would consider like the old way of being the fighting the Cold War. We're gonna go to war, like and then we went back like 30, 40 days later, completely different that we've ever done up until, this is 6 or 7 years I've been in the Army. It's like, this is crazy what we're doing. Like, I mean, whoa, like, what do you mean? Like, and that's what you started to see. Like, but so these people that came in after 9/11, they knew what to expect. Like, you can say what you want to say, like showing up as a platoon leader, it maybe it's different in the reserves because the guard, you might know these people, but like rolling into a platoon as a young dude, like just rolling up there is, and peacetime is intimidating. Rolling up when they're already in, theater, and these guys have 4 or 5, some of them 3, 4, 5 deployments. That's a tough thing that these guys went through. I mean, I'm in all of that, because I have a feeling I would have been fine too, but it's just a different level of the experience. You know what I mean? As
those deployments have slowed down, it's interesting though. As I get around military formations, we're starting to see more slick sleeves.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm glad you bring that up, because that's one of the funny things. I'm always like, how the hell did that guy not go to like? Yeah, because when we came in, it was like
civilians out there.
Yeah,
you wear a patch that shows your unit patch. In fact, I have a tattoo of my brigade right here. Or it was on my uniform. And if you see somebody with a patch on their right arm, it means that they've gone to combat.
Yeah,
and the generation older than me, didn't have anything on their right shoulders. And then my generation and younger forever did. And now we're starting, when I get around a military formation again, you start to see those E1s through E4s and even some E5s that are slick sleeves again on their right arm.
Yeah,
so,
when I came in, it was like if you saw it, you had the Desert Storm guys, but then as soon as you saw him, you'd be like, yeah, it was Desert Storm. You make a joke. I mean, I shouldn't make that joke, but
it was 100.
I said I was gonna be nice.
I said 100 hours.
We give everybody a hard time, but like no, but then you'd see like the other dude that was like the Vietnam veteran guy, and you'd be like, holy crap, like it meant something. Like so, like there was a difference. So like then it was like everybody had them, and then that was one of the things we had. My paratroopers were flipped out because I think it was the New Mexico National Guard that was there with us, if I remember correctly, but they all were able to wear the 82nd patch, and dudes were losing their mind. And I remember saying one time, we were like, yeah, I saw your 10th Mountain patch.
Yeah,
picture.
I'm sure
like,
they hate that.
Yeah, they're like, and I was like, there's a part of it, and I remember like these guys just fucking getting all pissed off and all this kind of stuff. They're like, this isn't right. These fucking guys aren't even airborne. And I was like, dude, if you had a chance to wear their patch or the fucking 82nd patch, and one guy goes, fuck, sir, you got to be right. I'd wear the 82nd one. I'm like, just shut up, dude. Like, what do you think you're gonna, like, of course they're gonna wear it. You do the same thing, I mean, knock it off. But that's
one of my favorite memories is meeting Bob and Liddy Dole. We went down while I was deployed to DC to meet one of the Ohio honor flights, and I went down in uniform. And Bob Dole was in the 10th Mountain when he was wounded in Italy. And he still, to his day, to the end, he carried the pen in his right arm that was torn up during his service in Italy. But he was a 10th Mountain veteran, so
I didn't know that.
Stopping and having a chance to get my picture taken with him and talk to him and show off, and for him to recognize the 10th Mountain patch. And that when you look back at I was the same way. I was racket about it too, but I'm like, they served fucking right next to us. Like, yeah, I mean. Yeah. Same,
why not? Yeah. Why not?
Same rockets.
I mean, different rifle, different helmet. No, but I mean, this, but yeah, it was the same. It was the same thing. So why not let them? Yeah. Cause that's the thing about the active duty. All those divisions have so much.
Yeah. A lot of pride.
Yeah, they should. A lot of pride. And
they
should. We all still know the 82nd is the greatest, but we won't go into that too much, but climb to conquer. It's all right. So I guess, looking back, I mean, we're getting close to 2 hours here. I guess a couple more questions, and I think we'll call it a night. But you had 31 years in the military. What are you most proud of your military service?
It's actually what I'm most proud of. Also in my civilian service, those football coaches who end up having a bunch of their assistants who go on to be successful football coaches. That's always been something to which I've aspired to. And as a district superintendent, I now have 4 of my previous teammates who have gone on to become superintendents, and I've got 1 or 2 others who should, and I hope do. So I can say that I've helped build 5 superintendents. Now, part of that is, of course, the whole, if he can do it, I can certainly do it, because he's, and the same thing in the military. I think it's what we do on building the next generation, of making sure that they have the right set of experiences and acquire the right skills for them to then step forward. So one of the great prides I have is seeing, former company commanders from when I was a battalion commander, former junior NCOs from when I was a company commander. In fact, one of my favorite things is walking down the street and somebody yelling, Captain Kraft. Well, I'm Colonel Kraft, but I love hearing somebody call Captain Kraft. So, because I know I'm going to meet an old friend, somebody that I served with a long time ago, and seeing those junior NCOs and those junior officers go on to achieve sergeant major, to achieve first sergeant, to achieve brigade command and beyond, and even general officer. It's building that next generation. It's what I believe in from an educational perspective, why we exist, from a parent perspective, but from an officer and NCO perspective. It's building that next generation. So that's probably what I have the most pride in.
Yeah, I love the answer, because I look at mine and there's like all my moments don't really have anything to do with like me, but I like there's one of my NCOs, John, and then another one, Griff. They both retired as warrant officers, and I like when we reconnected, and I found they were warrant officers. I was like, holy shit, that is so. I'm like,
that's cool.
I don't know how much. Like, I'm not like like patting myself on the back at my shit, but I'm like, holy cow, they stayed in, they were successful. So like, I feel like, those are the moments you're proud of. Like, exactly right. You see people that you work with that stayed in, are successful or better themselves, or
well, for a branch like Ordnance Corps, that's
Yeah.
the same as making sergeant major. There's not as many opportunities to
Yeah.
command at that battalion. And
and you see, and I'm like,
brigade
how the
level.
fuck did they? No, you're just like, it's always
no, that's really cool.
Because I remember John, I'd always like, he was my ops NCO, as company commander, and I wasn't the greatest guy. But him and I spent so much time together. It was like, he was the guy that like I could still call him, and I don't never call him by his rank. I've always, he's been John to me, but like when I found that out, I was like, holy crap. Like, cause he wanted to get out at some point. I was giving him shit about getting out. Then I got out, and like, I always felt bad about that, but to see him retire, it's always like, makes you feel good. And like, just the moments when you like that, cause that's always a gauge to me. I've never realized until you said that. I was like, I don't know if I've asked it that bluntly, that question, but,
if you go through,
if you start saying like, oh, like, I don't know, I just look back at all the moments I'm happy it's about. It's like when I've taken care of, because all the things I achieved, I couldn't have done it without anybody else. That's the other thing. All those things, like
the friendships endure. I still get together with my task force commander and my roommate from Afghanistan. Yeah. It's just because there's a shared set of experiences that you had that nobody else has ever had,
Well, you took my B question because you added into your civilian job. So the last question we always ask everybody is, so, we talked a little bit about it, but like with all the focus and attention that's on veteran and warrior class suicide, what do you think's not being done that needs to be done?
It's amazing the stories that you hear. And I hear this more on the kid side. Somebody, a kid who's made a plan to hurt themselves. And then somebody does a random act of kindness, stops and gives them a ride, says something nice to them in passing. And that kid later tells the story of that's when it changed. That stopped me from taking that next step. So I'm convinced that individually, personally, what we can do is that extra reach out, that extra text, that extra I love you. Yeah, one of the friends we lost this last week, I saw just a couple days before we lost him, and I will always treasure the fact that the last thing that he and I ever said to each other is "I love you, brother." Yeah, so those kind of things that we all of us individually, we can put structures in place, and I'm really excited about what I've heard in terms of the approach of Save a Warrior. So if you're looking for, an organization to which to give, I don't think there's any better that are out there in terms of tying in the concept of ACEs into the military experiences and that interplay. But individually, I think the biggest thing we can do is to be there for one another. Yeah,
I love that answer, because the one thing I was great at the buddy check, and it's one of the things, like, my university does this buddy check, but it's always like, if you're gonna buddy check somebody, like, really want to be sincere about it, like really check in, and those random acts of kindness are unbelievable. Just to say hello, and I'm a pretty social guy, so I talk to anybody. But a lot of time I wasn't really listening. I mean, and that's now, I think the big part about it is like, ask people, be nice, but like when someone says, how you doing? And like, I find myself, I ask somebody how to do, and all of a sudden they're telling me shit that I was like, holy cow. But okay.
But stop.
I'm sorry that's happened to you.
Be in that moment,
I think that's huge. Yeah. Like, cause you never know. I mean, there's all those things you see all the time, like, those sweatshirts to say, like, the person behind me, you care. And I think that's true. I mean, the listening, and like, we've already talked on, on this podcast, but, like, be there, like, truly be there for those people, and reach out. Cause there's the organizations, like, obviously the hotline for it, and all the formal things, but sometimes it's just talking to the normal person, and being nice,
Yeah, it's those random acts of kindness. It's amazing.
I do find that random acts of kindness can backfire on you very quickly, though. But you just, at that point, I just walk away, and I know that that's something that person is going through. You know what I mean? I just had a random act of kindness at Costco that didn't go very well.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, I mean, I'm okay with it because I've been there before, but I was just like, man, I'm just trying to be like,
Yeah.
generally give you a compliment or something. And all of a sudden it just turned to the point I was like, but I continue to be like, is there anything else going on you want to talk about? And it didn't go well, but it's fine. But it doesn't stop me from doing that. But it is like, that's the thing too, is like, when that happens to you, I've been the same way. Is like, I've lied, gotten angry with other people when they've asked me how I'm doing, but yeah, just, be resilient and be there. You know what I mean? I think so. I love that answer though. Like it is powerful that one moment that showing that you care can change the world for people. Yeah. Cause you're right. You talk not even kids, you talk about adults that have stories that like some random, I was going to call one more person if they didn't answer the phone.
All right.
So, well, awesome. Anything else you want to hit while we're closing it out?
No, I appreciate the work you're doing and appreciate the time with you. So
is today your birthday?
No, it's actually coming up here in just a couple of days.
So Corey's wishing a happy birthday. She said she posted earlier, I think, that she grew up on your street and your house was the place to be.
Yeah, she's I
always think that people don't realize that I'm looking at that. You can't miss it if you've never been to the TV show. We told you not to look at it.
I apologize.
Well, no, because it's actually great that you didn't look up there because there's some stuff that's been going on and it's always fun because Josh will pull it up. But well, happy early birthday.
Thank you very much. So
how many years? How old?
I'm going to be 61. I remember when my dad was 61, he was old.
Yeah.
But no, I'm still young.
My dad's 77. He's old. Personally, yeah. Looking over there.
Very good. Thank you. Good night.
He's off the phone because it's not baseball season right now. He knows I was talking about him about if it was baseball season, my dad would be on the phone. And I know the Yankees are winning because how his body language is. Is it true?
Fair enough.
All I got to look at is I can just see how his body language. Like, fuck, the Yankees are losing. But no, I want to thank you for coming on. I mean, and really thank you for your service to the country, to the state. You've been to a couple of different states, but 31 years as a Army officer and Marine. We'll let you. We'll be okay with that. And also your services, with the education system. Yes. Thank you for that. I know there's been a ton of sacrifices for yourself and for your family, and I know you don't need to hear that, but thank you for that, and
thank you for your service, Chuck.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Right.
So we'll end it. And one of my least favorite parts of the night is tonight we'll talk about a soldier or Marine actually, unfortunately, took their life tonight. We're going to honor U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Stephen M. Osborne, 32 years old. Stephen took his life on March 10th, 2022 in Merrimack, New Hampshire. Stephen was born October 29th, 1989 in Whittier, California. Stephen graduated from Valverde High School in 2007 as a class valedictorian. After graduating from high school, Stephen enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. Stephen served in the United States Marine Corps from 2008 to 2012 as a logistics specialist, assigned to the 3rd Low Altitude Air Defense Battalion, 3rd LAAD in Camp Pendleton, California. During his time in the U.S. Marine Corps, Stephen deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Stephen loved sports, especially the Raiders, Dodgers, Lakers, and the Kings. Stephen loved working out, hiking, listening to all kinds of music, podcasts, and spending time with his family and friends. Stephen will be most remembered, loved, and missed for his laugh, smile, and his caring heart for everyone around him. Stephen is survived by his fiancée, Cassandra, son David, parents Deborah and Jerry, brother Michael, sisters Renee and Jessica, grandmother Mamie, his dog Lola, and numerous other relatives and friends. And please, if you or someone you know is in crisis, please contact the Veterans Crisis Hotline at 988 or at 1-800-273-8255, or you can press 1, or you can text 838-255 or chat online at veterancrisisline.net/chat.
Hey.
Yeah. And this is always weird because I didn't realize you switched to ADA, and he actually was an ADA guy.
Yeah,
that's
I heard
interesting
that.
when I do this work. So
low air defense. He was a Stingerman.
Yeah. I was like, holy cow, I didn't realize that. So yes, again, I want to thank you for coming on. We'll end it. I stuck with an education quote. I got 2 quotes. So we'll quote President Lyndon B. Johnson first, who said, "Education is the key to opportunity in our society, and the equality of education opportunity must be the birthright of every citizen."
Amen.
And then the other one I had from, I think tied into what your career has been, even though you're only in the Marine Corps for a little bit. This is from General Alfred M. Gray, the former commandant of the Marine Corps. It said, "To lead is to serve, and to serve is to lead." Then when I looked at your your career. I feel like you've definitely been doing that on two fronts. So again, thank you, Paul, for coming, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Che.
Thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Very good.
Great conversation, and we'll see everyone in a couple weeks. Everyone have a great night,
Good.
and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks.
Good.